Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, March 24th, 2025. We're here this afternoon for a work session with Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner John Kafalis and Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. We also have our county manager here, Lorinda Volker. And I am going to turn things over to Leslie Ellis, our Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources Director, to introduce the topics this afternoon, the first of which is the Loveland fire impact fees.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you. Leslie Ellis, as you said. And we have two items on the agenda today. Eric Freed will bring to you this fire impact fee topic. It should be fairly brief and straightforward. If you do have other questions, we may come back or follow up on those. And then the bulk of our time today will be to talk about the transportation funding. We have some of our team in the audience here and our consultants here today to present some information to you. So with no further ado, I'll pass it over to Eric. Thank you.
So as you know, for several years now, we've been collecting fire department impact fees on new building permits. We have intergovernmental agreements with several of our fire departments. Loveland Fire Rescue Authority approached me about wanting to adjust their fees. They had a board meeting in January and took action on a couple items, but one of which was to recommend increased fees. The fees are in line with the original Nexus study for impact fees based on what growth is expected in the fire department and what their revenues and costs are. They could have raised the fees to this level back in 2021, but chose not to, just to kind of mollify it. So now they're coming back and asking to raise it to the maximum amount that was allowed under that original Nexus study, which is $1,187 per single family, $950 per multifamily, and then there's a square foot, $144 per square foot commercial, 12 cents per square foot industrial, and that's all in your packet. So I wanted to know if the board was okay with that, had any questions or concerns. If the board was okay with that, I'd like to put it on a consent agenda at a future admin matters meeting, and that's really all there is. If the board had questions, there's not really time today. We can reschedule this, and we can have someone from Loveland Fire come to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Commissioner Shattuck McNally maybe has a short question.
Yeah, quick short question. Eric, knowing that the fire authority there's a big portion of it outside of city limits, unincorporated area, and then there's the portion that's in the city. Are you talking about the fees that just apply to the unincorporated areas or to all of the fire district? And if so, are those two pots of money or fees kept in those separate pots? Curious about that.
Right. Yeah, we only deal with fire department building permits outside the city, so in the unincorporated area. My understanding is they've already gone to the city council and gotten approval to raise the fees inside city limits. But we have nothing to say about that, really.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any quick questions? Any thoughts on bringing this forward on a...
I support that.
Okay, so it looks like we're in support of bringing that forward on a consent agenda. Thanks for bringing this forward.
Thank you. I'll put it on a next consent agenda I can find.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll invite our consultant team to come on up, and then we've got others here who can step in if we have additional questions or insights needed. So I'll tee this topic up very quickly. We are here to follow up on transportation funding topic and some post-election ballot analysis and communication strategy going forward. So Magellan Strategies, Ryan Winger is here today, and Brian David Blakely and Sarah O'Keefe from Public Alignment, to my right here, are here, and they'll each give you a presentation on the post-election survey results and then an update on the stakeholder interviews and next steps, and we'd like to discuss those with you. And then we would be looking for feedback or questions on those items, and then any guidance or thoughts you have around our communication and engagement going forward. So let me tee up the next part of the slides for Ryan here. And, okay. And I will pass it along to you, Ryan.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie, and thank you all for your time this afternoon. I'm going to move through this relatively quickly just so that we can make sure we have time to answer any questions you all might have. But obviously, the core purpose of a post-election survey is really to just try to figure out, do we need to go all the way back to the drawing board? What do we need to change? Just trying to get a sense of how voters were, viewing all of the different issues that were before them last November. And so this was a survey of 1,381 voters across Larimer County, conducted at the end of February and into the 1st of March of this year, with a 2.63 margin of error. Pretty confident, obviously, in the results here, but as you drill down into these subgroups, you'll see, especially among the smaller communities.
Was that, was Mike?
Oh yeah, thank you. Here you see the red box there where we are highlighting exactly what turnout was this past year. So we know that these results are weighted to reflect accurately those who voted across the county. And so let's get right into it. The first thing we wanted to test, right, is how familiar were folks thinking back to what they had seen or heard about ballot issue 1A prior to voting. And what we found is that only 15% remembered hearing a lot of information. 44% said some information, but then you do have the 37% that said little or no information that they had received about ballot issue 1A. Obviously, that's a cause for concern, right? When you have over 1 out of 3 voters who are saying, I heard, next to nothing about the issue itself. And clearly, that has to play at least some role in the ultimate outcome. We then reminded them, okay, here's what the text of ballot issue 1A looked like, just to kind of refresh their memories, because we're going to ask them, how did you vote? 45% of respondents voted yes, 49% voted no, and 6% of those who completed the survey did not remember or didn't vote on 1A. So and you see how those break down along the subgroups. Again, we're not going to jump really into the subgroups here in the interest of time. We didn't want to leave it there. We wanted to ask why they voted yes on 1A or why they voted no. Among the yes voters, you see the core themes there. They simply just see the importance of investing in the county's infrastructure. They also viewed a 0.15 increase as a small increase for all the benefits that would come from it. They see the need with rapid growth and the changing needs of the county. They just wanted to have a vote for safety, quality of life. And also there is a smaller group that says, I want this because they do have that desire for improved public transit, alternative transportation. Not a huge group of voters, but among these yes voters, they're there, those folks in that camp as well. Among the no voters, really very similar themes that we see to any no votes on any tax increase. We already pay enough in taxes. They don't trust government spending or priorities. They want better use of existing funds. They want more specifics or just general concerns about inflation and cost of living in the environment as it was last November. We also want to ask this question when we do a post-election survey: did you find the ballot language itself difficult to understand? And clearly that was not an issue here. 85% of people said it was easy to understand, including half of them who said it was very easy. So thinking at the ballot language itself, it's not as if only we could make this more clear, that would solve the issue, because they find it to be pretty clear to begin with. Then we wanted to drill down on the specific bullet points that were found in 1A. And we're asking, did these bullet points make you more likely to vote yes, more likely to vote no, or were you kind of neutral or didn't have an opinion? And clearly the top 2 bullet points here, where over 50% are more likely to vote yes, are these 2 that relate to maintaining, improving, and then improving roadway, bridge, and intersection safety. So the 2 that are kind of broad categories that relate to upkeep and safety were what resonated the most with these voters, compared to these other 3 bullet points, where you have less than 50% of folks saying that they were more likely to vote yes, larger numbers that are neutral, no opinion, and also for these, you have a quarter or just over a quarter that say including that in the ballot language actually made me less likely to vote yes on the measure. the same 5 bullet points, but coming at it from a slightly different angle. We asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how important these bullet points were to them personally. And really, for something like this, obviously, it's great to see a 2-to-1 ratio between the 8 to 10, very important, that blue bar, and the 1 to 4, not very important, that red bar. And the only one of these that hits that metric of a 2-to-1 is that repairing, replacing, improving, maintaining, just kind of that broad category of keeping things up to speed, basically. You see there's safety as well, where at least the plurality of folks are in that 8 to 10 category. But you see, again, on these other 3, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, right? Where on the top one, where you talk about community transit services, other mobility options, maybe a lot of folks just say, I'm not exactly sure what that means. They don't know exactly how to evaluate that. And actually, plurality say that that's 1 to 4 in terms of an important issue for them. And the other 2, again, it's just a really mixed bag where, yeah, about a third are in that very important category, about a third are in the middle, and about a third are rating it as low importance. Just real quickly, we wanted to present them with future ballot options to see, okay, how would this make a difference in how you would vote? A higher tax increase that would incorporate maintenance of existing and future regional trails. How does that impact folks' vote? And you see here, it's actually a net loss in terms of the votes that you would get. 39% would be more likely, but 49% would be less likely, which is just something that's important to note moving forward. Yes, there are core supporters for those regional trails, but there's likely not enough of them to carry the day. Same type of question, a higher tax increase for regional highways. And we gave them examples of what we're talking about. Highways 34, 287, State Highways 114, 392, et cetera. And this one at least is kind of a wash, 44% more likely to vote yes, 42% less likely to vote yes, and 14% no opinion. This one is really kind of enlightening, and I think can tell quite a bit of the story of what was going on last year, where we're asking them if some other entity, without being specific, if some other entity other than the county were to place a measure on the same ballot, would that make you more or less likely to vote in favor of a 0.15 sales tax for transportation? And 17% more likely, nearly half say that would make them less likely, that 46%. And 37% say, no, it doesn't make a difference. I'll still evaluate them each on the merits. But clearly, when you have, without any specifics, we're just saying if there were other things on the ballot, or even one other thing, nearly half say, yep, that actually makes me less likely to vote on this measure for transportation. Then, just at the end of the survey, we'll want to get their thoughts on some benefits that a potential future sales tax would allow Larimer County to invest in transportation, and what benefits would come of that, what's most important to them. Reduce traffic congestion, again, not surprising there, 2 to 1, rating that very important. Improve safety, again, not surprising there. Interesting one on greenhouse gas emissions, because you do have 41% that say 8 to 10, but 39%, so almost as large, rate that in the 1 to 4, that's not very important. So those kind of cancel each other out in a way, is one way to look at it. Emergency situations, again, 39%, very important. Another 39%, rate it kind of somewhere in the middle. And then you have these last 4 that are really more of a mixed bag, where you don't have any of these where plurality rate them as very important. And it's just, these ones don't quite grab voters as much as things like, again, reducing traffic congestion, safety, readiness for emergencies, et cetera. We also wanted to give them a list of facts, and we did a little bit of this in our survey last year as well, but just trying to get a sense of, do these facts make you more likely to support a potential future sales tax? And what resonates the best is just talking about the unfunded need, this idea that the county doesn't have anywhere near enough to cover the total need right now, and also would lack money to bring in outside funding to the community. That always is something that resonates pretty well. Also, the idea that currently no sales tax dollars in Larimer County go towards transportation, that's something where at least 51% are more likely upon hearing that, although you do have some that are going to say, why not? You should just do it. You know, folks don't necessarily understand exactly how these sales tax dollars get educated or get allocated. They just view it as a big pot of money, right? Approximately 70% of residents and employees commute outside the community where they live. Okay, yeah, 51% more likely. But then you do have 37% less likely that they just say, yeah, that doesn't really grab me. Here we're, again, below 50% more likely. So these messages are out there. They resonate with some folks. When you just talk about the sheer size of the county and the miles of roads that are there, some folks probably have a sense of that. A lot of them may not. Talking about, again, a very small portion of property taxes collected are dedicated to road and bridge maintenance. That's kind of in the same category as they may say, well, why don't you just change that? And we know that that's not exactly something that's, you know, can be done, but it's there. It's how the average voter views a lot of these things. And what I thought was interesting as well is talking about how expensive improvements of the transportation system are. That really doesn't resonate. Folks are actually less likely to support it hearing that. So that's clearly not something that is, you know, it's something that for all the arguments that you can make for why this is important, talking about how expensive the work is not something that's really likely to move voters. Any final thoughts? We've got a lot of most of these final thoughts, or I shouldn't say most, but a good chunk of them are from those no voters, which is good. Like those are the folks that we're really trying to get a sense of where they're coming from. So even though folks still favor this infrastructure investment, and yeah, some expressing disappointment that it failed, they just want kind of a different approach or more kind of the second bullet point here. Anytime you have a large county, a lot of folks are going to look around and say, well, if you take some money from this and put it over here, you should have the money that you need, that kind of general viewpoint. And also just financial strain and tax fatigue just generally. And then you do have, which I touched on a little bit earlier, these mixed feelings on alternative transportation. You do have a core group of supporters that really want that. But then at the same time, you have a group of voters that view it as extra or not really, quote unquote, necessary in the way that just maintaining and improving roads and bridges is. And then we have our survey demographics. Again, these are weighted to represent what turnout was last November. And with that, I will kick it over to Brian and Sarah.
Just really quickly, would you like to pause and ask any questions of Ryan before we move on? And then Brian's piece will be a little bit more of the what next part of the conversation. So, but if you have any of the data questions, this would maybe be a good time for Ryan.
Commissioner Cavallis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Is it Brian?
Ryan, yes.
Ryan, thank you. One question that I have at the moment is what was the methodology used to conduct the survey? We hear a lot of things in the press that folks are not very responsive to surveys, and certain demographics are responsive a certain way. So I'm curious, how did you get folks to answer the questions? Was it, well, I'll stop there.
Sure. Yeah. So the nice thing about doing a post-election survey is that we have the voter file, and we actually know those folks that actually did cast their ballot. So we weren't even trying to interview folks that we know didn't vote. So the voter file that we get from the county has cell phone numbers for somewhere around 60 to 65% of registered voters. So what we did is we send a text to those voters and say, it's got the county's logo. It says Larimer County invites you to participate. Here, I'll actually go to the front. I think we have an example of what the text message looked like. Yeah, you see there on the left side. So Larimer County invites you to participate in this important survey regarding ballot issue 1A. So they know what it is. They know it's coming from the county. They click on the link and take an online survey is how it was conducted. So.
And may I follow up, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So based on what you just shared, Ryan, how many people still said, no, I don't want to participate? What percentage of the folks?
Yeah, so I would have to look up how many text messages we sent. Typically because you're absolutely right, for a phone survey where you're actually calling someone, response rates are actually falling below 1%. For these kind of text message surveys where they're able to click on a link, they can kind of take it on their own time. They don't have to take it all at once. Typically, we've been seeing response rates somewhere in the range of 4 to 5%. So.
I'll pause there, perhaps Commissioner Shattuck McNally. I may have one more at this time, if that's all
Commissioner
right.
Shattuck McNally, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for this work and all the information. I'm going back trying to know, was there a question on congestion and, or any kind of indication talking about, the commuters and any kind of feedback on the congestion or longer commute times?
Yeah, so if you go to, on this slide,
There it is.
certainly when we're asking them about the benefits and how important they rate these benefits, I think pretty clearly the top benefit for a lot of voters is the idea that this work would reduce traffic congestion.
And I don't suppose you have any way, when you did the study, of people taking the survey, people that lived in unincorporated versus urban, or any kind of indication? But like to this question, could you even break it down versus, are they traveling, if there are certain cities or people unincorporated didn't care as much? I'm just curious about.
Sure, yeah, so that's all in the crosstabs. I could look at that. We don't have it here in the presentation, but certainly we could see if there's a difference between whether they live unincorporated or whether they live in the cities, so.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for
Yeah.
right now. Thanks.
Commissioner Cafalas, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So, one last question regarding methodology. And it seems like you were targeting folks that, based on the voter records, people already engaged in the issue who had participated. And I wonder, how do you account for bias? Because we've recently learned from our public affairs director that, people that are already interested in a particular issue may respond in a certain way. How do we reach out to folks who may not have been engaged in this last election, or perhaps related to that, how important is it to connect with those folks? Because there might be a certain bias if you've already participated, engaged. You're either a yes or a no, and you kind of know the issue.
Sure, yeah, so that's a valid question for sure. I mean, I think in a presidential election, that's kind of the high watermark in terms of folks that voted. Whereas if we're doing a post-election survey, let's say off this November, you'd have a much larger group of folks that didn't participate and didn't vote. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the folks that didn't vote last November, for whatever reason, they very well are going to have pretty different opinions than the folks that did vote. It's just that when we're looking at a post-election survey, we're looking to say, okay, of all the folks that voted, why did you vote the way you did? And I think a separate survey would try to find folks that didn't vote and say, why didn't you vote? How can we get you to vote, kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. Those are two different groups of people that really probably don't view these issues the same way. So.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Certainly something to consider as we decide how to move forward.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions. And I don't think there were a ton of surprises, honestly, for me here. It's interesting to note. I think the most interesting thing is how little information people had in general, about this, which, I mean, all this is going to inform now what you think we should do, which is, but this is great information to have, and it's certainly, I believe can help us hone our message, right? I mean, and what it looks like to persuade people who are in the camp of, you should use your money better, or, why aren't you, taking money out of general fund, or all those kind of questions, right? And there obviously, is some, it's hard for us to understand why we can't take money out of the general fund to use for transportation. So I imagine it's super hard to convey that to the public.
Sure.
But it's, they just don't want to hear about clearly this is expensive and this is why we can't do it. They would rather hear about what we're going to do rather than why can't we do what they think we should be doing already. So
Sure.
I guess, yeah. Well, thank you very much. So I guess we will turn it over then
Yeah,
to
that's
Brian.
probably a good segue to hear a little bit more about stakeholder interviews that have been conducted, and then a strategy moving forward for communication, and then we'll turn it back to you for additional feedback. So I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Great,
Dave,
yeah,
thank you.
that is a great segue. Are you gonna
Oh, yes.
drive, or do you want me to?
I can probably slide it over
Can you
if
slide it
you
over?
want
With a long
to.
cord?
Actually, let me get the right slides up here first.
Yeah, so I'm
So stall for just
Brian
a
David
second.
Blakely with Public Alignment Business Partner Sarah O'Keefe. We work a lot with Magellan. We love working with them because they get the best data around, as you can
that
see.
should work.
One of the things that we really like, and this answers a little bit your question more in depth, Commissioner, is like, what we're trying to get a sense for is who's most likely to be coming out in 1 year or another year. We want to obviously inform everybody, whether or not they're voting or whether or not they're registered to vote, just because they're residents of the community and it's tax dollars being allocated. However, we also want to be very cognizant of, okay, well, if you're considering going this November, it's going to look a little different than what it looked like last November, just because it's a different election cycle. So, how does this work?
Since it's PDF, you may just have to.
Oh, I just scroll.
Yeah,
Okay.
Scroll.
I will try to.
It's a little
Whoa,
bit touchy.
it's very touchy.
So maybe the arrow down will do the trick.
No.
If you go to full screen mode, you'll be able to arrow.
I usually use PDF, so.
So we've done this for many different public entities, cities, counties, school districts, et cetera. We really focus on the data because it does help create some kind of a map we can at least begin with, and then we can try to test it. So that's what we mean by a data-informed plan, the strategic messaging, like Commissioner Stevens mentioned, like, okay, now we understand a little bit better what resonates, what means the most to residents. They care most about taking care of the basic things. So we'll get into that a little bit. It's also about kind of meeting people where they are. Most people did not hear very much, if anything, last time around. And what they did hear, we're not exactly sure what they heard. Maybe they didn't hear that much, or maybe they heard something that was right, maybe they heard that was something that was wrong. We don't know. So we want to make sure that when we're out there speaking, whoever it is that's speaking for the county, behalf of the county, that they are speaking and saying the same thing, so that when people do hear something about transportation, it's the same thing. This is just some recent successes that we've worked with in the past. So just to give some semblance of like, yeah, the numbers don't look great now. They usually don't, because most people, as was said earlier, don't really know and don't understand why can't you move money from the general fund? Why do things cost so much? It feels like my property taxes go up every year. Don't you guys have plenty of money? So like all these kinds of questions are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that people understand. So we did, in addition to Magellan doing the poll, the survey, we did a lot of stakeholder interviews, and they came up with with the same information kind of came up. The issue and the need are not well understood. So informing voters is critical. Most don't know or fully understand about the funding shortfall. There are several messages that resonate more, and if there is a next step, it would be to take people from unaware to aware, and then kind of see where we're at, once people at least understand that there is an issue. So as Ryan kind of the data showed, the Larimer County is facing a budget shortfall, and as good stewards of taxpayer dollars, we'd like to ask residents to provide their input. We're not yet asking them to say, we've got a solution, guys, this is where we want to go. We want to just get them to just understand that there is an issue here. There's a couple potential solutions, but with additional leverage, additional revenue, you can leverage state, regional, federal funding, and ensure we maintain and improve the quality and safety of the roads that we all use every day. So last time you asked for a 0.5% sales tax to raise $17.2 million annually for transportation projects. Often when we work with our clients, they're considering a sales tax, they're considering a property tax, they're considering, whatever it is that they're considering. So these are just kind of to fill in the blank if that's something that you're willing to consider. Or there's potential budget cuts, and what would that look like? Without additional revenue, budget cuts would be necessary. They could impact road safety, traffic improvements, and needed road and bridge maintenance. So some examples of those might be, there's different ways to frame it, right? These are the projects that we would like to fund. If we don't have the funding, those projects won't happen. So we invited 27 stakeholders to share their thoughts, educate the public on the issues the county is facing. We ensure stakeholders are part of the discussion. This is essential because you need a lot of people communicating the same thing, a lot of people understanding the same thing. If people are hearing different things, it just gets sort of confused. And any room for doubt or misunderstanding, people are probably not going to give you their dollars. They're probably going to go, I don't quite understand that. It doesn't feel like they've done their homework, whatever it is, we're not going to support it. These are a list of some of the stakeholders that were invited to participate in these individual conversations. So from the business community, from the educational community, nonprofits, transportation, foundations, all across geographic areas. And the themes were fortunately largely the same. And so I won't spend too much time on this, but there was more positivity around continuing the conversation than we don't always see that. Sometimes you start talking this thing like, yeah, people don't want it. We don't want it. But there was actually a lot more positivity, and they echoed the same thing without even like being aware of the data. Like people just didn't hear about it. They just weren't aware of the issue. They didn't understand the situation the county finds itself in. So that just emphasizes the importance of really telling the story, understanding that it is the political landscape. It is a tough challenge. It's not easy to ask people for taxpayers for more dollars. This year isn't necessarily going to be any easier than last year. If anything, the voter turnout generally might be a little harder, smaller, lower turnout, typically less progressive voters and those sorts of things. So just looking at the electoral strategy, it's a little tougher than it would have been last year. However, there's an opportunity now to have a lot more time to have the discussion and inform people and make people aware, and especially keying in on the things that resonate the most with people. So for the next step, as I sort of touched on just a little bit, we don't like to generally come out and say, here's the solution. It's a sales tax of 0.15%. We like to say, community, look, we asked you last time, in this case, we asked you last November, you all said no. We're going to take a step back, have a conversation with you all, let you understand exactly the situation that the county finds itself in, help you understand the projects that could be funded, help you understand what the potential solutions are. But before we get there, we want to hear from you what you think of what the situation is that you all at this table are quite familiar with, but that most residents obviously are not, because they're not, they don't have the time and everything else to really inform themselves on it. It was mentioned earlier about certain specific areas. So the city of Fort Collins, city of Loveland, unincorporated Larimer County. Those are kind of three major areas where there are a lot of voters, and the conversations might look a little bit different, but they're really important to focus on because there are a lot of people there. So the community engagement plan, and I'm moving fairly quickly just so you guys can kind of get a big picture on everything, and then we can but if there's any question anytime, please feel free to interrupt. So the community engagement plan would have three components. It would have the external communication, which would emphasize the messages that came up as most, resonating with voters in the survey. So that would include the messaging, the tactics, website, social media, these kinds of things. So it's easy for people to feel like they're engaging and easy for them to give their input. So an interactive website that helps people at basically a 24/7 open house is how you could think of it. People can just like log in and say, oh, yes, I understand what the issue is. Here's my 2 cents. Internal communications, making sure the staff and leadership are aligned, and stakeholder engagement. So all those stakeholders and more that were listed. Actually, Leslie and Mark, it's a much larger list of all the stakeholders that would be engaged on this. To make sure that they're a part of the solution, that they're a part of the conversation, that they understand what's happening. And the whole point is to raise awareness against, right now, there isn't any, or hardly any, and consistently saying and repeatedly saying those things that resonate the most with people. This is what people care about. This is how the county is listening and what the county would be putting it towards. Again, I mentioned the interactive website and asking for community input. That's the whole point of the interactive website, is so people can get on there, ask a question at any time, give their opinion at any time, push back. We like to layer it so that it is essentially, most voters are not high information voters, but they do want to know something, and they're a lot smarter than a lot of people realize. So they want to be able to, at least in 30 seconds or less, be able to go to a website that's easy to find, easy to understand, and is speaking their language, right? A lot of times we think, oh, infrastructure. Everybody knows what infrastructure. No, people don't really know what infrastructure means. You start naming specific projects, you start saying 14% of the budget, you start saying this is where we're at because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, I understand. And then a certain 20-ish% will say, I need a little more information. And so we have that one more click away, and they can understand a little bit better. Oh, this is the list of projects. This is how it coincides with the master plan, the transportation master plan that's being worked on. This is a very thoughtful, organized organization that's actually, been working on this for a very long time and been taking care of our roads and bridges the best that they can. And, frankly, not getting any credit for it, because in the end, everyone thinks, county government's just fine because my roads are fine. Everything is going great. Like, why are you asking me for money? So it helps people feel good about understanding the complications of funding and the numbers that you got to cover it. So, of course, social media, paid and organic posts to drive those messages and promote the website. Again, the internal communications, it's really important to get internally staff alignment, because there's a lot of staff here as well. There's some examples of the paid print and sponsored media. I've got more examples at the end if we can get it, if you want to see exactly what those look like. I won't spend a lot of time here because I think most people understand what online videos and paid social media, dedicated e-blasts, out-of-home advertisements. These are the kinds of things that we typically reserve for those clients that have more difficult roads to climb. And I say this would be one of those for a number of reasons. I think you guys probably know. I mean, you've already asked, and they said no. It's a large county. You've got at least 3 distinct populations that might have slightly different understandings and projects that they care about. And it's just right now it's a bit of a wild economy. I mean, day to day, we don't know what the next thing is going to do that's going to just seriously impact everybody. And so so these are all things that just to be cognizant of how we create this plan. So we do like to ask the board, so if it's the county, you all, we will give you a messaging matrix, so talking points, a palm card, which is almost like you guys have all campaigned. It's just something very quick and easy. It's like if you got 30 seconds at the meeting, you just say, visit the website and distribute the palm cards. If you get 10 minutes, there's a slide deck that you can give at the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce, Transportation Infrastructure Committee, or the Northern Colorado, Legislative Committee. Like, these are the kinds of things, so it's just easy. And it's the same thing, and it's visual, and it's clear, and people are hearing the same thing, and it helps kind of build that momentum so people understand what's happening. Community meetings, either counties themselves or already in the community that are out there. This is like Gantt charts onto 2 slides. This kind of like lays out how this would all work if you guys decide to move forward with it. So there's like make sure county leadership is aligned, understanding what the spending priorities might be, making sure that the county has what it needs when it goes out to give the presentations. What we're proposing is not going dark, don't continue to talk about this issue. Because if you stop talking about the issue, people will assume it wasn't that important. County will figure it out. We said no, they'll figure it out. They'll move the money around or whatever that is that they need to do. Have the conversation over the next couple of months to give people the opportunity to understand what the issue is, to understand what the challenge is, and to let you know how they would like you to resolve it. Then do another survey and see if people have moved. See if people have now understood the issue enough to realize, oh, okay, I'm aware now that now that I understand what this issue is, I get it now. Now maybe I'd be supportive of spending, an extra $10 or $20 a month, whatever it is, to do the sales tax or potentially property tax, whatever the potential solutions are that you guys would be willing to propose. See where you're at. So that would be end of June, early July. And then if it looks more positive, and it's up to you. Maybe you guys think like we did this when Arapahoe County debruced, last year, and they're like, they told us last January, they're like, we don't care, we have to go. So we're like, okay, well, we will do what we can. It ended up working out quite well. Past 71%. We've done it for other counties. Don't expect there's 71%. Usually it's like in the 50s. But it's usually positive. Most of the time we're successful. It's just a matter of understanding where people are at and being able to kind of take a point in time measurement. And that's why we say talk to people, let them absorb what the issue is, see where they're at, and then ask them, okay, now that you're understanding where it is, do you feel like it would be something you could support? That still gives you another couple of months in July and August if you want to do more communication around, let's just say somehow, yeah, people have now understood what the issue is and now they're supportive and they're leaning towards a sales tax. That would give you enough time to say, okay, we've heard from people, looks like we're leaning towards sales tax. What do you think of this kind of final general thought, idea, before you all have to vote in August and make that final decision on whether or not to put something on the ballot this November? So sorry if that was a lot, but I know we're limited in time, and I just wanted to get through it all to get all the questions and pictures. And please, yes.
Yeah, I just have a quick addition too, which is to say that the Transportation Master Plan, as you know, is wrapping up also this spring and summer. So I think the timing of this coincides well with that. We have not done a lot of other internal coordination with Michelle and others yet. We really wanted to come to you and just gauge if you're comfortable with us continuing some level of conversation going forward that might surpass or be a little bit more than what we would do just as part of the Transportation Master Plan to help raise awareness, as Brian is expressing, and then come back to you for further direction. So I'll just add that piece in really quickly and then turn it back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shaddock McNally.
Thanks for it's nice to see you again. I think we talked at CCI. Just happened to be on the phone this morning early with Arapahoe County and their commissioners.
Oh, you
talking-
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good friends with Commissioner Wongoli and others, and so we were talking, and I mentioned this today. I know how pleased they are because they were really in a lot of dire straits there. So thank you for your work for them. Couple of questions. Well, first, let me make a statement. I mean, I feel like what Magellan showed in some of the conversations meets anecdotally what I was hearing on the ground. Since I was on the ballot too last year and going every corner of the county, it pretty much matches what I was hearing and experiencing. So if, I feel like that's kind of interesting, because sometimes you wonder if you're really getting a really good grasp of different universes and things. So I have two questions. First question is, I have been continuing to have this conversation, and it feels like, even though it didn't pass, it kept saying, well, the need's still there, and I've been talking about it and some of the needs of the funding, because we're having this funding conversation constantly, and that was kind of the thing of my letter to the editor that was published today, that I keep getting phone pops. I don't know why it resonates with everybody. It's just kind of weird because I thought it was kind of boring myself, but no one wants to talk about the funding thing. But I feel like sometimes people are more willing to listen when you're just having a casual, talking about the information but not asking for something. So that's my first question. Is that a valid?
Yeah, you nailed it. Exactly. People are that much more open at this stage when it's like, guys, we're not talking about anything on the ballot yet. We just want you to understand this, and let's just talk about this. Absolutely.
So that's also kind of my experience. So just curious,
Yes.
because I have worked on ballots issues when I had no experience in the behavioral health and rant and all those. So a lot of different experience, but it's great to have this data. My second and question for now, and I can always ask Leslie more questions, is how do we do kind of the strategy? And maybe this is not unique to Larimer County, but we do have certain areas of the county who are get it, or maybe understand, or more willing to spend a little more. And then we have some areas of our county, I'm trying not to be too specific, who actually stripped away some taxes and are not thrilled about or have confidence in their local government. I'm not saying Larimer County, but other local governments. So they're kind of frustrated with them. So how do we develop a strategy to not get sucked into these other issues, but keep us about our message and our kind of what we're trying to do? I hope I worded that appropriately. So,
No, it's such a good question. Just since you mentioned Arapahoe County, a large county with so many different municipalities, very different politics and just, I don't know what you want to call it, culture almost, like within each of them. And there's, to answer it most briefly, one, there's the overarching message that we always are going to say no matter who, no matter where, no matter when. Always. And then there's some more specific that might resonate more or make more sense to talk about specific to, oh, this happened in Loveland last year. Now this means that this is going to happen. Oh, over here in Fort Collins, slightly different. They just, re-up their transportation. So you have to be sensitive to the community that you're in. And those are two very, they went through two very different experiences this last November. So I think it's important to recognize and understand those, how different those are, and rural, Larimer County. And those are the three most important areas to be talking about, because they're the ones that'll be impacted the most.
Great, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Cafalas.
Before I ask my questions, or at least some of them, I'd like to do a time check, because I want to make sure that the chair has an opportunity to ask questions or provide insights. And I suspect we have a couple more items after this.
Thank you for checking. We only need about 5 minutes at the end just to go over some of the hearing procedures or what to expect this afternoon. So as long as we reserve that time, we should be in good shape.
That means we have a whopping 9 minutes to have this conversation. That's just dandy. I'll begin, if I may, Madam Chair, just a couple here. So one of the takeaways from the Magellan survey was that on the one hand, some folks, overarchingly, people said the ballot question was understandable, and yet there were comments about it was too vague and not specific. And then I seem to recall that in the resolution, we provided some specifics around potential projects. So how do you bridge that seeming gap in understanding?
Yeah, it's such a good question. The ballot question, the ballot language is so important, and I think that speaks to the importance of doing a second survey once we've had a chance to inform and hear back from people what they care about the most, and really using that website to get into having those layers of detail so people can get into it if they want to, but making the ballot language very simple, very straightforward. If it's too long, people tune out. They're, oh my gosh, they're throwing everything in there and we can't do it.
But we still have a need to provide some
Yes.
level of specificity so folks have an idea of what are some potential projects that have been listed.
Exactly.
May I do one or two more? And maybe this was addressed earlier, but I can't always pick up. There's a lot of talk about urban-rural divide, and having spent some time up in places like Livermore, Red Feather Lakes, and others, one of the resounding messages is we pay our taxes, but we don't get anything for it. And so I wonder, how do you overcome that? And related to that question, there are different demographics and how you reach those folks. So, for example, a big body in Fort Collins and Larimer County is college students, Front Range Community College, Colorado State University. How do you reach students to demonstrate where there might be a focus there on multimodal options, mobility options, although that term apparently is not quite understood, versus folks who just want to fix bridges and make more roads. And I think coming from us, one of the important values is how do we address the fact that we're in a severe non-attainment area for ozone pollution. How do you bridge those kinds of things? And then changing demographic is older adults. Forgive me, I've piled on a few things here, but the main thing is how do we address that faction of our population that is perhaps more rural, that thinks like, well, we're paying plenty of taxes, but we ain't getting nothing in return. And then you have older adults who maybe need more non-driving options to get from point A to point B. How do you address that? And then the final question would be, there was reference to some of our partners and like the chambers, the NCLA,
Yep.
and I wonder how do we engage them and who pays for some of this stuff? Because once this thing, if we decide to put it on the ballot in November, then we can't spend any money.
Right.
But we can do educational stuff, I think, ahead of time. So who pays for it? How do we engage the partners? And how do we reach folks who live in places like Livermore that say, pay taxes, but I don't get anything back?
Yeah.
And certainly older folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
No,
good luck.
Yeah, no, good questions. So we have a window of opportunity where we can help the county with the strategy and the engagement now to inform residents to ask what their input is, looking at places like Livermore, working with Leslie Mark and others to understand what are the dollars that are being spent on rural, how do those decisions get made, so that people understand how that works, how that might be different, and, just from a priority standpoint, from someone that lives in Fort Collins, that wants more bike lanes, that wants more of this and that, doesn't resonate across the board, right? Doesn't resonate with other rural voters in other parts of the county. Like, they want the roads and bridges, like those messages that showed up the most for people in the survey. That's what they cared about the most. So this is the careful balance of helping people understand the difficult situations that you find yourself in, but also realizing, look, there's this many dollars to go around. These are the projects that we prioritize. We want to hear from you if you think there are other projects, hence the great alignment with the transportation master plan, to be able to talk to people so that they can understand this is how the county thoughtfully makes decisions. So those were some of the things that I covered. So social media, an interactive website with an easy to remember URL. We like to do with Arapahoe County, we do a lot of out-of-home advertisements. So whether it's showing up at the restaurant, at the gym, at the very gas station. I mean, we were literally everywhere. To be able to make sure that people understood, oh, there's somewhere that I can go right now. I can click on this URL, on this QR code, and I can tell them what a project I want funded, or I can tell them I think this is a great idea, or I can tell them I've got questions about this. So 24/7, they can just immediately, within seconds, literally, which is what everyone's expectation is now, right? You can order anything you want and be on your doorstep in days. They want that of their county government. So that's the strategy that we're recommending, is being able to let people engage at any time.
Okay. So if we thought about doing this year, it's a very different electorate, and it's very different to run a campaign in an off year, even though we know we have several municipal elections and school board elections. It's a much smaller electorate. What does that look like? When you gave examples of some of the counties that and municipalities you've done work for, have any of those elections been run in those off years? And how does that change some of the work that you do?
They have been running those off years. Most of them are, right? Because we only get one one on year every 4 years. So most of the time we're
No, but I mean, you get every 2 years, right? Because
Oh,
you
yeah.
would still have like a midterm sort of election, kind
Sure.
of, it's those kind of odd years that are
Yeah.
slightly different, but
Yeah.
anyway.
It's in a way, it's harder because you have a more conservative electorate, but you also have a smaller electorate, and there typically are fewer things on the ballot. We've had enough conversations with stakeholders to know that you guys aren't the only ones thinking about running for revenue increase. So it's coming. There are going to be other things on the ballot, and that doesn't bode well for this this issue, unfortunately. So what we do is we try to do as much information for informing of residents and voters now, so that you can make a better decision come early July. So you say, okay, after 2 months of informing people, now we understand people are going to be maybe supportive of it. And then we engage the stakeholders to hopefully pick up the campaign on their own. As Commissioner Kafal said earlier, right? The county can only inform people up until August, and then once it's voted on, it's done. So it's obviously the numbers aren't quite as advantageous as in the presidential year, or even every 2 years, and senators running and that sort of thing. But you still have the advantage of being potentially one of the only things on the ballot, and so there's a lot more just focus on it and ability to inform around it, and especially if we see where we're at and the numbers look good in that second survey, can make an informed decision on whether it makes sense to go this year or not.
And I'll ask one more question, then we're about at the 5 minutes we need for the end of the meeting. But when you say putting up a website that has information that's easy to remember, URL and all that, can that website stay up even though it can stay up? So while we would have, and we, meaning the county as a whole, would have to go silent, as individual commissioners, we could obviously still support something, on our own. That's not, we just couldn't say, we're representing the county, but
Exactly. And we're happy to, come back whenever it makes sense and show you an example of what this website looks like as we kind of build the whole plan to just show you what we did in Arapahoe or what we did this doesn't, but I guess the whole point that I'm trying to make is, yes, inform people. It becomes a public record of all the engagement that was done by the county from whenever you decide to say now, which actually I guess we've already started since January until August. These are all the people we spoke to. This is what the information that was relayed. This is what we heard from everybody, and this is the decision that was ultimately made to put it on the ballot. Then that's just in the public record. It stays in the public domain. If there is a campaign, most of the time there isn't, to be honest. Most of the time there isn't an active campaign. But if there is, they point back to the website and say, look, this is what the record was, this is where the dollars would be going, this is how it would be funded, this is why it's important, according to what the public said when the county was having those conversations with people.
great. Well, thank you. I think that, I guess to be continued, but, I certainly like the idea of educating people on why this is important, why we need these dollars, and why we are spending the dollars well that we are given, and yet we still need more for these big kind of projects. And I get that people don't want to hear about how expensive things are because they have a firm grasp of how expensive things are in their own lives. That speaks to why we need these dollars, why we just can't, find dollars within our current budget to be able to spend on projects that are tens of millions of dollars. So, that, like you said, if people need more information, they can dig back in. But, I'm certainly very interested to see, what persuasion on this issue looks like because it's very needed in the county, so.
And people respond, right? That's one thing that the survey did show. It's like when people hear about it, they go, oh, and like they want to learn more. And when it speaks to what they value, they're interested in, in being more supportive of it. So the opportunity is there. It's just a question of, having that conversation and seeing where people are at after they've been given the time to really absorb and give their input.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Ryan, Brian, Sarah. Appreciate you being here. And like I said, I think these conversations will continue.
Yeah, thank you. And we don't want you to feel rushed at all. We can bring more information back, and I think we'll have opportunities as we have the conversations around the transportation master plan and other opportunities moving forward too. And if there are materials that you want to share with the commissioners as we continue to refine some of this information and communications, we can bring that back too.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Jenny is going to just give you a quick sense of what is before you for this afternoon and evening and answer any questions you may have about the hearing procedures.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jenny Axmaker, Planning Manager. So we have 2 land use hearings this afternoon. We have our 3 o'clock hearing that currently contains 3 items on consent that we don't believe will be pulled off unless something unexpected happens. And we also have the continuation from March 10th for the PRPA 1041, where our intent is to further continue that item to April 21st. Right now on the agenda, that's the last item on that hearing agenda. I might suggest that we go ahead and do that item first, just to get it out of the way. We did have a press release go out, making sure that the community was aware that we weren't taking public comment or actually having any decision-making occurring on that item on this agenda today. And then we do have a 6:30 hearing this evening with the Halligan 1041 permit as well. That's the only item this evening. I do have updated public comment to distribute to you that we've received, mainly on the Halligan case. There's also something on Bacon Lake, just for your information.
Okay.
Do you have any questions for me?
Questions? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Regarding the continuation of the Platte River Power Authority 1041, how will that take place? Just moving it to April 21, or will we also be providing information that has been requested, regarding, the requests that the public has made on specifics? That's a question I have.
I'm going to ask Frank Haig from the County Attorney's Office.
That's probably a good idea. Also, as Frank gets situated, I wanted to point out that on the evening 1041 permit application, On the 53, I believe, conditions of approval, conditions 14 and 15 are repeated. So you already are aware of that,
Yeah, we can correct that.
of course. That's an easy one.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank Houck from the County Attorney's Office. We are going to provide some information about the continued hearing at the meeting here at 3 o'clock. And that way it'll be on the record with all three of you there and everybody will have that information.
And there'll be a motion to continue this till April 21, whatever other details are needed?
Yes, sir.
I guess,
That's it? Anything else?
thanks, Frank.
All right, that's it. So, wow, we did it. 2:31, we're adjourned. Thank you.